Hey friends, Sonia here with Ellie and Mac today, and I am going to go through something we get a lot of questions about in our Facebook group, and that is pattern grading. Now, before we start off on pattern grading, I'm kind of going to go through a small glossary of terms so that you know what I'm talking about if you're not familiar with how this all works. So the first thing is pattern grading itself is to taper from one size to another size based on your measurements. So whenever you are opening up a new pattern, you pull up the size chart and you see what those measurements are. And in all of our patterns, we have a diagram that shows you here is where you measure for your bust measurement. So right about here. Here's where you measure for your waist, which is here, and then your hips is here, and depending on the pattern there may be other measurements that you're going to want to look at. So once you go through, and typically what I like to do is print out that page that has the measurements and the diagram on it, and you can actually circle, okay, this is where I fall in for my bust size, this is where I fall in for my waist size, and this is where I fall in for my hip size, and then you have a really clear idea of what sizes you're going to need to grade from. Now, the patterns are based on a certain body type or a body shape. It's called a block that the pattern is drafted off of. And everybody has a different body shape, and we all are unique and beautiful and have our own awesome curvature. So your body is likely going to fall into more than one size based on what your measurements are. That's why we need to go through and change the pattern a little bit to make sure that that fit is tailored specifically for you. So you can play around once you get a feel for this with the ease. And the ease is basically how far the fabric sits away from the body. So something like this is the fitted ruched tee, and this pattern is obviously fitted, so it's right against the body. Some patterns like leggings are negative ease, so they're going to fit tight around the body and actually have a little bit of pull. And then you can have patterns like the going home sweater, and that one has a lot more ease, as in it sits away from the body, it's going to be looser and that kind of thing. So the ease really depends or really plays a big part in how your pattern fits, and that's why we want to grade between sizes to make sure that that ease is where it should be. Hope you're still with me. So today we're going to be going through grading this top, which I said is the ruched tee, and I'll link to this pattern in the pattern description if you're interested. Now this is the fitted version. I did the crop length, and it has this really great detail in the back. We're going to go through grading today, and I'm going to show you how I do it, and let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and circle my measurements, and I like to print out the size chart so that I have this easy access so I know where I'm making these adjustments. So the first one is I know that my bust falls into the medium range, so I'm going to circle that one. My waist falls into the large range, and then my hips fall into the small range. So we're going to be doing some different grading back and forth, and this is really, really typical, and that's why you always want to grade so that the pattern fits your body the best that it possibly can. So we're going to start at the bust, and I'm going to mark the medium lines. Now on this particular pattern, you have a slim and a slim fit and a fitted. So I'm going to mark on both so that I can keep both handy depending on which fit that I want to make. So this is about the bust. Now our waist is typically the furthest in point on the pattern, which is about right here. Now our waist, we're going to mark the large, and this is a little bit easier if you have a color printer. Mine is black and white, but you can tell really easily because the lines for the slim fit are dashed and for the fitted are solid. So I'm going to mark the large waist for the dashed line and for the solid line right here. And the next thing I'm going to do is mark my hip at a small. So we've got our hip. Your T ends at about your hip, so I'm going to mark a small on that dotted line and on that solid line for the smalls. Now all I'm doing, the reason I know which is I've got small, medium, and large. I didn't print the rest of my layers because those are the only three sizes that I need, so I can count from the inside out, knowing which one is which, and I'm going to do the same for the solid lines. You know that that's the small, that's the medium, and that's the large. So that's how I'm deciphering those lines. So the next step that we're going to do is I'm going to alter the slim fit, so the dashed line one first, and I'm going to go from this bust line to that point that I made and just draw a straight line. And then I'm going to go to this point that I made here for my hip mark. Now this shows you that I have a fairly straight side. I don't have a big curve in my waist, so that basically straightens out to match what my personal body shape is. And I'll just go through and make that a bit darker so that hopefully we can see it and cut it better. Now, next I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the fitted. And now I have where this front bodice has two different fits that I can choose from. Now I have both of those fits adjusted for my body type. And all you're going to do is cut your pattern like you would normally, but just cut on your adjusted lines here, depending on which of those two fits you would like. Now I'm going to go through and make these same changes to my back. You always want to grade the front and the back, of course, and it's just like when you heighten or shorten a pattern, you're going to want to do that to the front and the back. So any of these adjustments we're making, you've got to make to all your pieces. Now, those are for this particular pattern, those are the only adjustments that we need to make. The armbands for the slim and the fitted are just going to take the medium because that's how far out we are here. So I'm going to use the medium size for the armbands if I make the tank. The neckline obviously didn't change, and we don't have a hemband or anything. If you do have bands, you just want to look at and use the size of the band that corresponds with what size you are at that point. So for example, if there was a hemband on this one, I'm going to use the hip size that I fall into, and in this case, that's a small. If there was, if it was a crop or something like that, like this crop is actually a little bit longer than the waist, so I would probably use somewhere just between that large and that small because it's kind of in between those two markings. So I would just draw a line between the two of them. So you just want to take into account any other pieces that might need adjusted and make sure that you adjust those accordingly. Alright friends, thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial. I would also really highly recommend checking out our Facebook group. All of our patterns we started doing their own album for, so you can actually look at each pattern and the album for it, and underneath those photos it'll say here's the fabric I used and here's the size, and you can actually see how the pattern is supposed to fit. So once you get a hang of your pattern grading, you can play around with that a bit more and tailor the fit to more what you want it to look like. So you'll see in our Facebook group people talk about sizing up for a more relaxed look or sizing down for a more fitted look and those kinds of things. So if you look in those albums and see, because all of our testers always sew the size that they actually fall into. When we're testing, we don't do modifications because we want to make sure that the pattern fits the way that it's drafted, and then we leave all the modifications up to you guys. So you can look at those albums, see how the pattern is intended to fit, and then you can go in and say, okay, so this pattern is maybe more tight in the bust than I would like, so maybe I know that I am a large bust, so I'll do an extra large to create a little bit of room there. For the going home sweater, you could size down maybe if you wanted a little bit more fitted than it is, because that's a bit more relaxed. So those are just some examples of some ideas that you can play around with the fit once you have a handle on your pattern grading and how the patterns are supposed to fit, and kind of go from there. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure and check out our other videos and subscribe. We have so many fun videos in the works for you all, and we look forward to seeing you next time.